Hi folks, welcome to Tuesday's edition of the iWrite Radio podcast stroke videocast. I did go looking for Prime Minister's questions today because I thought it was Wednesday. I was wrong.
Good effort.
I was wrong. I've got Jimmy Hutton with us. Hi Jimmy.
All right.
You better get down to the shops if you're taking the car now because Jimmy's off the road for an hour. I've got Stewart Lochhead with me.
Hello there.
We're going to start with the press conference, which I believe the BBC still wants sight of what she's going to say before they decide whether to actually broadcast it.
I think we didn't find out whether they did or not. They didn't.
Well, I think it's rumour in the BBC. The tweets I've seen about it have been people I trust who say they've been talking to people in the BBC. But a very strange thing if a politician has to give a broadcaster sight of anything they're going to say before they get questioned by the same broadcaster.
True.
What did we think of it today? Jimmy, did you watch it today?
I didn't, mate. No, I was still wending my way back down to Leith. I'm assuming that the row about testing is still going on.
It's got me
UK.
exercised, Jimmy. It's got me. I was screaming at the telly earlier on.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit like it's a rewind. 6 months. You're forced to ask, why is the Scottish government, the First Minister, being so calm and accommodating about the UK running this awful testing system? We discovered, if we didn't already know, which we did already know, that the First Minister had a conference call with Dido Harding and Matt Hancock yesterday about the issue. I'd love to have been a fly on the wall for that one.
Jimmy?
It's like talking to a cabbage and a carrot at the same time, eh?
I know. But the big question is, they've had 6 months to plan this.
This is not a Scottish government exercise.
I know, but
She
they've had 6
cannot
months to fix it.
But she can't start arguing with them. Yesterday, she said almost exactly the same thing she said today. The BBC reported it as Sturgeon slams UK government. That is not what she said, and it's why we need the briefings in full. The BBC totally misrepresented by omitting what the important bit of what she said was, we're working together to sort this out. That's why she isn't fighting with them about it.
It's a bit like,
of the day, they still need that. Sorry, but they still need that testing. You know what I mean? They need that Glasgow lab to be operating at 100%. And if Dido Harding, she's had long enough. Unfortunately, we can't remove her. But if we just point out daily how she's failing in her job and failing to provide the service to the people of Scotland that the UK government is absolutely adamant that it is capable of doing, that's not a bad thing for us, as long as we are still getting our other testing done through our NHS and through our labs. It's just unfortunate that we need to use the UK lab quite so much.
Yeah, but we could still end up with, for example, the care homes, which they get regularly tested, and their tests for processing have been going to the UK system.
Yeah,
but they've been taking 5 days to come back.
That's the unfortunate thing, Stuart. That UK processing system is breaking some of the promises that the Scottish government have made to the care, to our frontline workers, to carers and to nurses. You know, they've told them that they'll get regular testing. No use getting regular testing if you're not getting the results, is it?
Well, but the thing is, it's going to look, the press pack. I mean, every second question was about testing today.
Eventually,
and they are asking. You know, people will die.
It will eventually dawn on them that the guy doing all the complaining about the testing in care homes, same guy, what's his name?
Robert Cllr.
Aye, Cllr, who is a Tory supporter. It will eventually dawn on them that his problem isn't the Scottish government, it's the UK government who can't run the UK system because his tests are going to the UK system.
Aye, but he specifically makes sure that when he questions anything or when he gives any piece to camera, the blame only heads to Edinburgh. He never ever puts blame to London.
But eventually, she'll be able to turn around and say, well, Mr. Kilgore, maybe you should be talking to Westminster, because we have worked with them to try and solve this problem and they have not been capable of solving it. Therefore, we are taking it out of their hands and your staff will be tested by NHS Scotland. The groundwork's been laid.
Yep.
Can but hope.
Can but hope. I suppose the other important, well, there are quite a few things, but the second important point about the presser was the First Minister explained why they were changing the method of counting the number of people in hospital with COVID. And I'm not going to try and explain the difference, but the difference, the impact of that difference is, it would have been under the old system, what was it, 200 and odd, where's the numbers here? 262 in hospital, according to the old system. But under the new system accounting, it's only 48. And the reason they had to go and change the system, because at one point in August, it looked as if a third of all the people in hospital in the UK, in hospital for COVID, were in Scotland. They were using a different system in England than in Scotland. So they sorted that out, but it'll, you know, it'll bed in.
Right.
How the press will handle that, I don't know.
Well, if it's the same system they're using in England, the press won't bother handling it.
The Fruit Loops will have a field day though. And the
Yeah.
conspiracy theorists, they'll be telling us, they'll be batting in, doing their tinfoil bonnets and telling us that Nicola's lying to us and that there's a secret death factory somewhere in Lanarkshire or something like that.
We've also got fake calls. Scammers have been phoning up people in Scotland, apparently, asking for money and for their passwords. So the First Minister was using that as a good reason to be in front of the public live, because she can explain to them, it's two things. It makes it clear why she needs to be there on the telly live, and it actually does a public service. So, I mean, they're the same thing, really, aren't they?
Thereby underlining her argument and making the BBC look stupid. Expect to see a piece on BBC tonight about that.
We got Jason Leach admitted that he's going to get the blame for cancelling Halloween next, as soon as he got the blame for cancelling Father's Day, Mother's Day and Easter.
Good on him. I'm glad it's on his shoulders.
Who's going to take their hands up for blaming for cancelling Christmas?
By the way, Easter wasn't cancelled.
Was it not? Did you
No, I sat at the dining table and ate an Easter egg, which is all I do for Easter.
She scalped the guy from the Express, not the usual guy. I don't know if this is Richard Percival, not the guy with the wonderful Middlesbrough accent. He asked a political question about the internal market, and she refused to answer it. She explained, I'm not going to answer that, and scalped him. So that was fair enough, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The rest of it, well, you know, it's
usual stuff, but
oh,
information.
Lothians. The question, the other thing was, it matters to us. Will Lothian be the next local health board area to be going into extra restrictions? And we didn't get a definite aye or no. Although the suggestion was from both First Minister and Jason Leach was that probably not. Lothian seems to be a bit different.
Right, they don't see a source for it.
A direct, they can't see.
Yeah, that effectively was.
So
there was nothing to change because they couldn't identify its epicenter, shall we say. Okay, you mentioned the political question at the press conference. Yesterday, with a 77 majority, they passed the internal UK market bill, thereby basically castrating the devolved governments. An interesting thought that occurred to me, the day after the 2014 referendum, David Cameron stood outside 10 Downing Street and announced evil. English votes for English laws. Yesterday, I would suggest Parliament passed legislation that could be described as ESOL, English votes for Scottish laws, because this legislation gives them power basically over any decision made in the devolved parliaments. Am I wrong about that, Jimmy?
No, you're not. They have ripped up the devolution settlement that both Scotland and Wales voted overwhelmingly for. England obviously didn't get a vote on that because it was nothing to do with them, really, devolution. It was our baby. But they've torn that up. They've driven a coach and horses, whatever metaphor you want to chuck at it. Basically, any minister in that Tory government can now legislate for however they want in devolved areas in Scotland. And we've got to put up with it because it's passed in Westminster, and Westminster is the mother of all parliaments. So I think it's time for some direct action by the Scottish government instead of whining about it. I don't quite know what they should do. They're getting paid hundreds of thousands of pounds a year to come up with the options, aren't they? But I think if they sit back and take this and hope, I mean, right now, their only hope is that the House of Lords holds it up.
That's no good enough.
What else are they going to do? It's about time they actually, instead of complaining about things, done something.
What do? They walk out. Thereby,
well, I'd suggest that they turn around to Boris Johnson and say, look, give us a Section 30 right now because we want independence. And then when he says no, you say, right, fine. Well, next year's Scottish Parliament, we're going to take that as a plebiscite on independence. And when we win it, and win it we will, either you sit down and discuss it with us or we walk away. End of story, Boris.
Come on, this is the big question I've got to ask. What if they decide they're going to cancel the Holyrood elections next year?
It's not in their remit to cancel the Holyrood elections. The Holyrood would make that decision.
Everything in their seems to be in their remit. They seem to think they're all powerful.
Well, if they're
all powerful, they're English, but they can't cancel the Holyrood election.
If they do attempt to cancel the Holyrood elections, that's it. Now, you know, I have argued against UDI from day one, but that would, as far as I'm concerned, be reason enough for a unilateral declaration of independence.
But I mean, up to now, you rewind, let's say, just 3 months for the sake of argument. We've just seen an enormous power grab taken of devolution, not just of Scotland, but Wales and probably Northern Ireland. And yet, 3 months ago, we might have said there had been a great reaction here in Scotland to that. What's happened?
The BBC, for a start, have barely covered it. There's an awful lot of people just don't know it's happening.
But that's not any different than 3 months ago or 6 months ago. We knew the BBC would comply.
Well, I mean, we've been banging on about this since it first came up on the horizon. And it's getting, you know, Twitter, Facebook, etc., social media. But the BBC are ignoring it. You'd be lucky if there was 2 minutes on it last night, and half of that time was taken up with dross, talking about Scottish business benefiting from this. Scottish business will not benefit from this. The only people who will benefit from this are Tory supporters who give them money.
That's it. It's corruption writ large. This is the most corrupt, I would call this the most corrupt government we've ever seen in this country. Given just how much money, how much power they've taken to themselves, and using that power, how much money they have handed to their friends. So we are sitting looking at the most corrupt government in the history of the United Kingdom. And right now, Edinburgh is saying, gonna go and no be quite so corrupt, and gonna go and no mess us about quite so much as you plan to. They need to take action.
I'm not sure what they can do, Jimmy. Short of, you know, declaring independence from Westminster, not necessarily as a country, short of turning around and saying, right, from now on, Scotland runs everything from Holyrood, and you ask our permission to interfere.
Aye, perhaps that's what they should do, mate. Peter Bell's idea, asserting the primacy of Holyrood, because that would absolutely be a red rag to a bull to Westminster politicians who consider.
But they hold the purse
Westminster
strings.
to be sovereign.
They hold the purse strings, you know, and the majority of people who are paying big bucks in tax are not suddenly going to start paying it to the Scottish government because they're mostly unionists.
I'm not sure how that works, because I mean that is one of the defining points of who's in charge. What's the difference between protection money and tax? It's merely a question of what's regarded as legitimate.
I actually would reframe that and say, what's the difference between protection money and giving money to the Tory party? Because I don't think paying tax qualifies you for special treatment. Too many of these people avoid tax. What qualifies you for special treatment is financially supporting the Tory party.
Well, you're right. All I was doing was describing a definition of when I was studying politics. It's just a definition of what is a legitimate government. So you're right. I was just giving a description.
And their right to be called a legitimate government suit the windy as well. How you can vote to break an international treaty that's less than a year old? I mean, where do you go with that?
Because
it just shows you how much they've got the press tied up. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? The press are completely and utterly in their pocket. There's hardly anybody. I mean, writing an op-ed's one thing. You know, writing an op-ed criticising, anybody can do that. Christ, even the Express have carried pieces that criticise them, and the Express are that far up Boris is behind, you can barely see their feet. But to allow politicians to consistently sit on television and tell you lies, you know, it was bad enough when Theresa May was doing it, but Boris is a million times worse. But they told us, and they've told us since 2016, that there will not be a border in the Irish Sea. There will not be any difference between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. They knew they couldn't deliver it. They've known for years that Brexit was a unicorn. They could not produce it. And they still go on telling lies. And now they're at the point where they're just saying, well, you know what? We've got away with this for so long. We're just taking control of the country and we're going to do what we want. And regardless of what the press or what you think about it, hell mend you, we're doing it. We're in power for the next 4 years. Ram it.
Right. I'm going to posit one of the biggest questions that's not been asked yet. Right. So if they don't put a border of any kind in the Irish Sea, that leaves the EU forced to put a border in Ireland, because otherwise it's a backdoor into the single market for Britain. Britain becomes a pirate, a smuggler, the biggest smuggler in the world. As soon as that happens, you've got violence coming from the Republican side. The threat at the moment appears to be violence threatened by the DUP supporters has got Boris into this mess. This has been suggested by quite a few people. And the question I really want to ask is, what if they decide to have violence in England again? And does that suit Dominic Cummings' plan? And that's like getting a war.
Before you had your say, I was thinking that a war would quite suit them. But they can't call any side in Northern Ireland going back to guns a war, because that's just such a huge failure. But I think the position in their head is, if they fight with the EU over this, if there's no deal, if the Northern Ireland Protocol is thrown out, somebody has to put something on the border between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. That somebody being the EU allows Boris Johnson to say, well, it wasn't me. I didn't put it there. Blame the EU.
Blame
So
the
will
EU, blame their terrible, terrible single market that we really don't want to be a part of anymore because it is creating strife on the island of Ireland. You blame the single market.
Well, what you'll get then is turning around the arguments that have been made at Boris Johnson about being an international rogue state. He'll start calling the EU a rogue union, and everything will be turned on its head, as they've done just about with every single argument they've ever had with the EU. But if the EU, sorry, or the Irish on behalf of the EU start putting border posts up, Boris Johnson's off the hook. I told you there wouldn't be any border down the Irish Sea. I told you we wouldn't put border posts up between Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland.
The problem with that, though, is that should he force it to that stage, he has no access to the single market. He'll have no trade deal whatsoever. Europe will freeze us out for 6 months or so. And in that 6 months, when businesses are going bust left, right and centre, they'll hope to bring down the British government because they can afford to shut us off completely. Where do we sell our produce to if it doesn't go to Europe? You know, where does this, you know, you're talking probably 30 or 40% of our agriculture, 80% of our fishing. All these businesses are gone down the tubes and Europe just sits back and watches and goes, "No luck. That's what you get for screwing us over on an international treaty."
Well, the other option is he gets a bad deal, i.e. has to give up lumps of fishing, cannot guarantee to subsidise businesses in Northern Ireland the same as the mainland, and for the next 10 generations he blames the EU.
Well, the question is, I mean, let's rewind a bit. You posted to share a piece about circling the wagons in Downing Street, which with some clarity. Apparently you were saying Joanna Cherry referenced this on Twitter, and it was just clarity on what actually happened about the difference between when Theresa May had a deal which the Brexiteers voted down, and Boris Johnson's deal which they managed to get through with the new parliament. And there were 3 points: leaving the customs union, avoiding a hard border in Ireland, and no regulatory divergence between Northern Ireland and GB. Now that's what we call the border on the Irish Sea, isn't it?
Well, this is essentially the 3 promises the Brexiteers made, only 2 of which can be kept in whatever order you want to put them. One of them has to be broken.
According to the Brexiteers.
No, the Brexiteers made promises about no borders, about access to the markets, and about sovereignty. You can't have all 3. One of them you have to lose one of them.
And you know, as we pointed out, a hard border in Ireland, that lets the new IRA, the whatever the commission, whatever they're called, the extremists there, to allows them to start blowing up border posts.
No, I mean, the Americans will never allow that. You'll be paying £8,000 for a bottle of whiskey in America.
So do you think
a hard border goes into Ireland?
So do you think that Boris and co and Dominic Cummings will back down and put in the regulations in the Irish Sea in spite of the threats from the DUP?
I think they'll have to.
I think they're more likely to screw over the DUP than they are to annoy America.
I think you're right there. Because, I mean, to be honest, this so-called border in the Irish Sea, it's no different between what, if you go to Jersey, I used to import cars, second-hand cars from Jersey. And you had to go through customs and make customs declaration. I mean, I'm sure it's not any worse than importing and exporting to Jersey or the Isle of Man. And their crown dependencies.
It's the problem would be the unionist reaction to it. The reality is they could very easily bring in regulations that would be light touch, as they like to call them. The problem is even light touch regulation is too much for the unionist community, who would say, hold it, we're British, why are we being treated any differently to the Scots or Wales?
Well, there is a genuine problem when you start subsidising industry on a government level, and you can do it on the mainland, and you can't do it because of the single market still pertaining in Northern Ireland. I mean, that is a quandary. But Germany regularly, and France and Italy, find ways round that within the EU. I just don't think they want to work at it. I just don't want to think they want to interact with the EU.
London chooses not to find ways around that particular problem because they didn't want to put money into. They're putting enough subsidy into Northern Ireland, they feel. They didn't want to put more into Irish industry.
Well, that's a question that I'm not so sure about, Jimmy. This is what I want to ask. Well, what if this, one of these pillars or red lines that they're talking about is this: they want the ability to feed extra money into companies in Northern Ireland. And is that not just another bribe to because most of the businesses in Northern Ireland are unionist owned, the ones that are getting this state aid?
Well,
I think we should maybe take a look at a wider issue in that why they've always said they have to subsidise Scotland, which we clearly know is a nonsense. But they've always said they have to subsidise and massively subsidise industry in particular in Northern Ireland. Why are they going to continue to do that? The unionist community are no longer the majority in Northern Ireland. The nationalist community are the majority. And over the next 20 years, if things keep going the way they've been going, it's not going to be close. At some point, Britain's going to wash its hands of Ulster because Ulster will be a massive problem that they no longer want to fund. Maybe they're just getting their retaliation in right now, causing a massive problem with Europe about Ireland in the hope that they force Ireland to reunite. Maybe Britain wants to wash its hands of them right now.
Well, according to polling, the Conservative and Unionist Party want shot of Northern Ireland. I can't remember. It's in the high 50s, if not low 60s. They don't want Northern Ireland.
Well, their supporters, their voters. Was this recent polling?
And so, right now, the Irish don't think reunification is a good idea because that would be costly to their economy. However, I'd imagine Europe would absolutely throw billions at Ireland.
And America.
If reunification was a possibility.
And America.
But
the money that would come to America would be huge.
But honestly, if you're a resident of Southern Ireland, do you really want to import 1 million unionists?
No, they probably didn't, mate.
Can we not just send them all to Hungary?
They do want their country back. Most Irish citizens, they wouldn't consider themselves Republicans, but they do consider themselves Irishmen. And partition still grates at a very, very high level with people. I mean, partition, it's been a disaster every time the Brits have tried it. That's why they were talking about Shetland last week.
Another one. And Palestine.
India.
Okay, so we've talked about Ireland. Scotland. How does Scotland get out of this dysfunctional United Kingdom? Wings has written a piece.
Yes, indeed.
You've done a bit of work on this, Stuart.
Where is my paperwork on that? Because it's, as I explained, it's not Wings. In fact, I don't know.
It's not. It's Stuart Campbell.
It's been published on the Wings website. We discussed this briefly yesterday. The proposal's been signed by Iain Lawson, who, may I point out, is a very old senior SNP member. Very old, I don't mean very old, but very long. But he is probably. Kenny MacAskill MP, Councillor Chris McEleny, who's a left-wing councillor from Inverclyde, and now Professor Allan MacInnes, who I don't know, and Dot Jessiman. But it's a carefully thought-out plan, which I can imagine Peter Bell would be quite keen on. And it pulls together some of the suggestions we've heard quite a lot of in the last few months about how to commit to it's using the Holyrood election next year and making sure that in the manifesto that if the yes, and in particular the SNP, get a majority, they can then move forward towards independence. The detail, I'll let Norry, he's better on detail than I am.
Well, it's a different path than the Section 30 to independence. Now, it jumps about in the sense that it says there is nothing certain, there is no certainty, no certain path to take here. But effectively, they're talking about using the Treaty of Union. They're talking about renegotiating it, and I would suggest they'll do it the way the British government do. They'll put a good faith clause in there that they'll ignore, because the first thing at the top of the agenda will be the right of the Scottish government to initiate, run an independence referendum at a time of its choosing, which Westminster couldn't agree to. So effectively, the Treaty of Union will not be renegotiated, it will be chucked out the door.
But it's it is a very, it's not a huge document. It's worthy of analysis. I'd said to you earlier before we did the show, I would like to be able to study all the comments beneath them, but there are nearly 300 comments already on it this morning, and that's going to take me a couple of hours to figure out.
You're a braver man than me, Stuart. I never usually go to the comments on anything that's on Wings, because that's usually where the Zoomers are hanging out.
True, but I mean, I feel, given that it's a fair case, the document is obviously not written by Wings. You can tell. On the other hand, it's a very carefully argued case, and you could say, what, here you go. I haven't heard this said by anybody for a while. It's a route map towards.
I think you take a bit far there. It's saying an alternative is needed.
It's a bit unfortunate.
It's a step by step to some extent.
I was just going to say it's a bit unfortunate Chris McElheny's name's attached to it, given the Bible thumping he's been doing over the last couple of days. I think that laddie's maybe overstepped his position, and I can't see him becoming a candidate in this election. I think he might have just overstepped him up by rattling his beads and throwing his Bible in people's faces this week.
Oh dear. I missed that. I actually have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, sorry, no, somebody's taken a thing to conference about euthanasia. They want to revisit the assisted dying bill that Margot was pushing a few years back. He's taken a big upset to it, saying the SNP shouldn't take a position on this because that would upset people who have faith in their lives. And I'm more of the point, you can keep your faith to yourself. It's nothing to do with our political party, mate.
Well, anyway, the beginning, the first part of the steps, we can't call it a route map yet, but the steps, they suggest, first of all, it would have been nice if there was an internal group in the SNP was set up to consider moves forward. But given the pandemic and everything else that's going on and what the First Minister said, that seems to be unlikely. I could throw in the Growth Commission and Andrew Wilson and all that as well. So it would appear that it would need to be set up by an outside group.
Claxton, alarm bells, Mima.
Yeah, I know. And then it moves on to, there are actually two documents. There's an introduction, and then there is the alternative route. So they do mention the route. Sorry, Norry. To indy refs. That's the headline. And look, I'm going to hold it up. I got my pens out. Look, I got my pens out, and look at it. But
the problem is it's not a route. It's things change depending on the situation. We cannot say at this point for certainty. We need somebody to lay out an alternative route, step by step, that can be picked to pieces, put back together again until it becomes a route that people will walk down.
Oh, well, that's too easy. I think you're asking too much for that, saying that. However, I don't think it's the last time we'll be discussing these two documents.
I don't know. Jimmy, have you a subject you'd like to hit on?
Well, I'd just like to point out, just to go on that one there and say, if you're talking about an external talking shop, out with the auspices of the SNP, how many of those have we had? You know what I mean? We've had mere constitutional conventions in the last 3 decades than there's been restructuring in Scottish football. And weirdly enough, none of it works. Maybe we should just trust the party of government right now. Maybe we should just force them into... They've said they're going to put something solid in their manifesto for next year's election.
Well, look at Jimmy. That's what these documents are about.
Aye, but Stewart, if people are talking about it, but if folk are talking about it and they're not the SNP, are the SNP bound to listen? Probably not, particularly if it comes through Stewart Campbell.
Well, I think they just posted on his website, but
but by posting on his website, they are sending a message to Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP, because Stewart Campbell has been nothing but vitriol about Nicola Sturgeon for the last year. So they know exactly what they're doing by posting it on Wings. It's actually a red rag to see if Sturgeon reacts.
Reverend McAlpine's not been very popular either, and but still, I don't know. I mean, we've got Peter A. Bell. He blows hot and cold, but he seems to be pushing and pushing and pushing the SNP to come up with a plan that we all want.
Yeah, and I don't think they should, if they've got a plan, I don't think they should mention it to anybody.
This is the idea that the leader, the head of the SNP, have got a secret plan.
No, if they've got a plan, don't disparage it. It's bad politics to make it public. I'm sorry.
Aye.
If they have a plan and they get the majority that we hope they get at the next election, based on a manifesto that says the first act of this new parliament will be to arrange the timetable for an independence referendum #2.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a plan, and Boris turns around and says, oh, you can't have it. And they'll go, right, okay, this is what we're going to do. I don't want to tell him what they're going to do before he has to be told.
Mm-hmm. The problem is that vast amounts of blogs and hot air have been published over the last few years saying absolutely she doesn't have a plan. She's not got a Scooby. She's just wanted to sit in Holyrood for another 5 years, getting her 80 odd grand a year. I don't believe that. I think that there is something in place. And we'll see. We'll know till next year. We'll know till we see their manifesto. See exactly how they put it. If they put it how you just put it, Norry, brilliant. The first act is to call, to set up a referendum, to set up everything in place to ready to go. And then, like you say, if Boris says no, she has to have something ready to explode underneath him.
A lot depends on how the manifesto reads.
Mm-hmm.
Everything depends on what the manifesto reads. They have the legitimacy to possibly not go outside the law, but to use the law, perhaps to challenge a refusal for a Section 30 if they're still holding to that route. Then you need the mandate that is absolutely clear.
I think we have to force Westminster into declaring Scotland as a region of England. If they refuse to allow us the right of self-determination that the UN Charter confers upon every nation, if they refuse that, then effectively we are held as hostage to English votes. If that's the case, let them put that in writing, force them into producing a written constitution that says that. Then we take that to a constitutional court and have it absolutely declared null and void because it's illegal under the UN Charter. The fact that they've got an unwritten constitution means that right now they can do whatever they want. They can say Westminster is sovereign. We can say the people are sovereign until we're blue in the face, literally covered in woad. And they will just say, but Westminster's sovereignty. So what are you going to do about it?
Well, let's pull the two strands together of what the main topics of today. The Northern Ireland Protocol and how the Boris government is behaving towards that. What are we going to face on, say, the 3rd of January when everybody comes back from their not holidays because they're still all locked in their houses? Does the EU suddenly change their tune with regard to Scottish independence?
On the 1st of January, it won't be the Westminster government that is freed up. It will be the European Union. The European Union will be free. They won't do it. They won't overtly come out in favour of Scottish independence, but they'll be free to talk to Scottish ministers at a level they can't do at the moment.
It'd be interesting to see if that's Nicola's first trip. A wee sojourn over to Brussels to speak to Ursula von der Leyen.
Because that will then become possible.
Angela Merkel.
And it doesn't have to be Nicola. If the UK government, and I would fully expect the UK government to put some sort of barrier in the way of Scottish ministers from Holyrood going to Europe, I would expect some sort of nonsense. Can't leave the country without permission of the Boris government or something like that. And we've got 8 months before the Holyrood elections. And do you really think they're going to stop making mistakes at Westminster when it comes to Scotland?
Well, this is the question is how much of what they're doing is a mistake and how much of it was planned.
Everything they do that overrides devolved responsibilities will be a mistake.
You could be right, but I'm thinking more about the ending up with a no deal. I was thinking more about this.
Well, even if they get a deal, they're gonna upset the fishermen. Everybody's forgotten about fishing, but fishing is important in Scotland.
I don't think. Well, I don't agree with you on that one. There's not that many people who have a living out of fishing.
No. I mean politically. I mean, if they renege on giving the fishermen everything they want, and it doesn't matter how much they renege on it, if they renege on it, they're open to, sold the fishermen down the river again. What can you expect from Westminster?
Sorry, you're making a mistake of calling them just the Scottish fishermen. There's a huge divide between the East Coast and the West Coast.
Stuart, I'm not even thinking about fishermen. I'm thinking about headlines here. I'm thinking about the politics. I'm not thinking about the industry. I'm thinking about the Tories once again using the fishermen as a bargaining tool. Frankly, I don't care which of the 5 families goes bankrupt. You know, I mean, it's a very small part of my life, fishing. In fact, it's no part of my life at all. I'm thinking about the politics, the optics of the politics.
The optics. That's twice we've heard that word in the last couple of days.
Aye, well, it'll be a nice big bat to batter Dougie Ross with.
Aye.
If they do screw the fishermen. And frankly, it'd be nice to batter the Tories back into 3rd place in Scotland, particularly if we can get them down to about 15% and Labour finishing 2nd at 18%. That would be laughable to see those two parties unable to get 40% between them.
I've got a clip somewhere of Dougie Ross asking an interviewer if he'd seen the most recent polls. He was accusing him
I've seen that. It's a beauty.
Of getting no bounce. And the most recent polls, I think they were down to 3rd place, were they not, in the Salvation?
Aye, they dropped for 20. They dropped 3% since he became leader, and he seems to have been the only Scotsman not to have seen that poll, or if he did see it, he clearly didn't understand it.
Seems to be a very strange country. There doesn't seem to be such a thing as a new leadership bounce in Scotland. You seem to go down.
It's more of a thud, a dull thud, or a dull thud, as Douglas Ross would point out.
Yeah, but they keep changing their leaders because they're having such a hard time. So it's.
The problem is they don't have any leaders.
Well, they're branch managers. Let's be honest.
Well, are they even managers?
No.
You know?
They're assistants.
What's the rule that says that everybody eventually gets into a position which they're not capable of doing? I can't remember.
Voted beyond your ability, you mean?
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the rule. Phillips rule or something like that. I can't remember.
I'm just trying to think.
It seems to apply to unionist parties in Scotland anyway.
I was a branch manager in Frankfurt once.
It's remarkable how they can find quite so many FUDs, though. I mean, the actual FUD quotient at Holyrood's huge. When you look around, I mean, Jesus, some of them are quiet these days, but some of them aren't they? Alec Cole Hamilton, where did the Liberal Democrats drag that fee? I mean, there must have been a sale on arseholes that day, and they just bought the biggest arsehole they could possibly find, and it came at the chrysalis as Alec Cole Hamilton.
They got him on eBay. And a nasty piece of work, but smooth looking.
Aye. He must run about Edinburgh with protection. He must need it. I mean, he can't show his face in the streets of Edinburgh. People would like take that coupon and start using it as a basketball on the pavement, man.
He's that halfway house, though. He's neither fish nor fowl. And I think people look at the Tories in the west of Edinburgh, and well, they're not going to ever vote for the Socialists, and they just go, nah, we'll just have to take him. He's got nice suits.
I think you're right, but my reason is you'd still not agree with me, because West Edinburgh and South Edinburgh is where the rich people live.
Yeah.
And these are where they've got Labour, Ian Murray in the south, and they've got Alec Cole Hamilton.
I said socialist
in the west.
Stewart, I didn't say Labour Party. I said socialist.
They've got Christine Jardine as the MP and Alex Cole Hamilton as the MSP in the west. So.
I don't think he'll hold his seat this time. I hope not. Anyway. Okay, guys. Oh, sorry, Jimmy. You were going to say.
No, I was just going to say I do hope he's no doing the usual Tory thing of sticking himself. Sorry, the usual Tory thing. I suppose Lib Dems aren't really Tories. They're sort of yelly ones. But I wonder if he'll be on the list. That's what I was getting to, because some of our ludicrous people that sit in Holyrood, Annie Wells is probably one of the great examples. 2,400 votes, and she gets in because she was high up on the list. 2,400 votes. I'm pretty sure I could get 2,400 votes somewhere.
In Leith?
No, I'd get more than 2,400 votes in Leith, mate. I'd just tell everybody I'd buy them a couple of honey tequilas down at the bowlers, and I'd bribe them with honey tequila and get droves of votes.
I'm not sure I could do it without the prison population getting the right to vote again.
All right.
Okay, guys, call it a day at that. Thanks, Stuart Lochhead. Special thanks to Jimmy, who's given up his lunch hour for us. And thanks to everybody for listening. We'll catch you tomorrow, which will be Boris, the Prime Minister's question time. I wonder if he'll even acknowledge a question, let alone answer it.
Here Starmer won't be there if he does it, because he's in quarantine, isn't he, or self-isolation?
Well, if David Millipede does as well, was it David or the other one?
No, it was Ed.
Ed does as well as he did
yesterday.
It might be quite good.
But on the other hand, Keir Starmer
on
the screen. You can't do it on the screen because it doesn't work for Ian Blackford, does it?
No, it'd be Angela Rayner. Angela Rayner will step in. She's not had a shot yet.
And by the way, Ian Blackford needs to shorten his responses in Parliament.
I don't know. I mean, he's not going to get an answer anyway. He might as well take the opportunity to make a speech.
He needs to do 3 sound bites and leave it at that. He needs to get on the telly, and these long speeches don't get you on the telly. Okay, folks.
Leave the Westminster pies, Elaine, I know. Busting out these suits.
Okay, guys. Thanks for listening again, folks, and we'll catch you tomorrow. Cheers for now.